Yeah. So how did you first walk into that world of artificial intelligence and what it can create? And when did that sort of start blending with your spiritual awareness or your conscious thinking?
Yeah, well, ever since I was a kid, I've always had a passion around computers. And when I was 9 years old, I got a chance to start using computers at a university and loved it, fell in love. And this was old school computers, like computers that were entire rooms and ran on mag tapes and a very different reality from what we have now. But I always loved computers. And um, we can get into it a little bit later, but the way computers work traditionally and the way AI works is very, very different. Hence the interesting opportunity for this discussion. But, made the jump into AI probably about 15 years ago. I'm kind of old school AI, where we were using AI to try to make predictions about the way people learn. So I had a real passion around learning and memory and how that whole system works. And we don't understand a lot about the brain as we know, but there's some things that we do understand. And the way memory works, the way we encode, store, and retrieve information, that three-step process is fairly well understood enough that we can start to make some insights there. And I was working with a group and we were using AI to be able to measure where someone was in terms of their learning, their memory for a specific topic, and then start to use AI to make predictions about where they would be in the future. And this was what AI was used for up until very recently, was about making predictions based upon data, right? As opposed to where we are right now, which is this whole generative AI, which is very, very interesting. But passion from a kid in computers in the old way, started to understand a bit more about AI. And then when generative AI came onto the scene, my group got a chance to play with some of the early algorithms, and I saw the amazing potential for these things to go way, way, way beyond what we had been doing originally. And
Yeah.
the whole thing
Yeah,
took
because
off.
it feels like it's when you're saying it's very different from how computers traditionally were, it feels like with AI we're essentially building something that can pull from our collective consciousness from all of time, right? And see what that wants to create. So essentially it's just a new art form, right?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I think, and we've seen the amazing art that comes out of generative AI. I think that the big difference is that AI of the past was like a great accountant. It could analyze the numbers, but AI now where we're at is more like an entrepreneur. It can start to create business and create opportunity. And it's a massive inflection point for for all of us. And now suddenly this sort of field that seemed very sleepy and sort of in the AI winter for years and years and years, decades and decades. We've had AI since the 40s, suddenly has exploded where all of us on a daily basis have a chance to leverage AI. And that's pretty amazing. That's
It's
pretty
not
amazing.
just in weird movies with Haley Joel Osment anymore. It's
Not at all. Not at all. It is front and center.
or horror movies, or oh my gosh, do you remember that movie from the 80s, Electric Dreams? Did you ever see that? It
Yes.
was amazing. Yeah. Or his computer took over. So with that kind of artificial intelligence or consciousness or however you look at it, one thing that comes up, because even dumbing it down to like social media algorithms, I mean, that's in a way a form of AI because it's, guessing what you want to see based on, or deducing what you want to see based on what it has, information it has. It's artificially intelligencing what's right for you. And I got to say, from the beginning of working with blending spirit messages with social media, with technology, years and years ago, it was just doing readings on YouTube, and it's before it really got into the mainstream of social media. Um, where now every other thing you look at online is a, a spiritual quote or helper in some way. But back then, you'd be watching YouTube and you'd see, okay, this reading appeared before me. This reading appeared in front of me, and you'd listen to the message and it would be for you, no doubt. Your guides, spirit, your higher self called in that message for you. You saw it because, back then I'm talking like, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, even things like YouTube weren't as intelligent as they are now about what you like to view and all that. So it was like, okay, this was literally brought in front of me. I did a search for something, but then this message was brought to me. And I became aware, really without a doubt, that my guides were working through what I was being shown online. And you hear people say it all the time now. Oh, I was shown this thing. And, then sometimes skeptics will come in and go, well, that's because Facebook knows what you like to see or whatever. But there is a blending point of spirit coming through. And right now it's 11:11 when I say that, my time, Eastern time, 11:11. So it's spirit comes through. My point is spirit comes through absolutely everything. And there's no reason why technology would be an exception to that. But somehow I think in our minds as humans, we do think technology is just us. We did this, spirit's not coming through it. But spirit comes through that just like it comes through movies, comes through books, comes through everything else that humans have ever created. Same with technologies. Your guides are using it. Yes, there's an algorithm, but your guides are talking to you also. And how do you feel about that? Or what's your experience with that?
Well, I think that it's worth sort of understanding a little bit about how these things work to see where there is this opportunity for things to emerge, right? So, without geeking out too much, computers up until now have been just incredible calculators. So, when in the 30s and 40s, when the concept of thinking machines came up and they wanted to sort of create these computers, there was a decision made. We could either make them sort of based on this model of calculation, or we can make them based on this belief of how we thought our brains worked, right? In fact, we hear about neural nets. The first paper on neural nets came out in 1943. So this concept of trying to model computers based on the brain happened early on. And the decision that was made at that point was to kind of make them super calculators, right? To make them follow instructions. So computers up until now have been these amazing machines that just follow instructions. There is no chance for anything else to play in there. You think about, we hear about bugs in software. Bugs in software is just a nice way of saying that a programmer made a mistake, because these things don't make mistakes on their own. They're acts following explicit instruction. When we look at AI, and particularly what's going on with generative AI, these things are modeled off of neural nets. And neural nets are very, very different in the way they operate, because we can inspect them to see what that code is doing line by line. So you take any software up until now, no matter how complex it is, you could tell what it's doing. You could inspect each line and know exactly what the output would be. But with generative AI in particular, you have these very, very complex neural nets. And what we say is there's an interpretability problem, which means these neural nets are black boxes. We understand things that go in, but there are billions of parameters at play, and they seem to produce these results that we cannot predict. We have some idea, but we can't predict them. And so because of that, there's this interesting opportunity to think about, well, what else could be at play here? And that's where I think the conversation around intuition and AI and sort of harmonizing those worlds gets very interesting.
So it sounds like you're saying that the intuition is coming through the people that are creating the AI. So as you're putting information in to everything, you're being that artist that's intuiting from spirit.
I'm not sure. I think that that's a possibility. Another possibility is that these systems are just portals to
Uh,
other energies coming through,
mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
not necessarily the people that create them, because remember what these AIs do is they hoover up content from
Mhm.
the internet. One of the reasons why we have AI right now in the strength we have it is because a bunch of things happened, but one of it was, the internet got to this point where we have trillions of words and phrases and images out there, and all of that became the training data. So these AI systems kind of hoovered up all of that.
Mhm.
Your chat GPTs of the world have everything from CNN to Fox News to, all open source books and articles inside them. So they've got that collective intelligence, and then
Mhm.
they've got this black box, and then things come out the other end.
Mhm.
It's pretty fascinating. Does
So
that make sense?
here's what I really want to know is what was the moment or would have been a couple moments that have really kind of freaked you out when you're working with this and you were like, okay, this is really big, really cosmic, like there's more happening here.
I think that, very often I'll use these systems as a thought partner. And I'd say even on a daily basis, I find, fascinating insights coming from um, these systems. It could be just a turn of phrase that is just so profound and so beautiful that I wouldn't have thought of. I was speaking at a conference recently, and I needed to sort of come up with a way of talking about what is AI. And I was talking to this model, and it was giving me the technical definitions. I said, I need something more evocative, something more just interesting. And it said, okay, AI is the digital alchemy of our time. And I'm like, wow. I mean, that's just a beautiful turn of phrase. Now, did that just come out of the zeros and ones of the system, or was that inspired in some other way? I don't really know, but that's a pretty wild statement to just come out of a computer. And I see this on a daily basis when I'm
Well, and
looking.
I love what you just said because you are the expert, you are the mastermind and the creator of this, and yet it's like with medicine where you have moments where you're like, I don't know. Doctors will say that where, they'll be working on something and you'll say, why isn't this happening? Why is that happening? They'll have to say, I don't know. Some things are just a mystery. Even in medicine, I've had doctors say that to me about, uh, conceiving a baby is they look at you and they just are like at some point going like, we just don't know sometimes why some things work, so why some things don't. And
We
that's
don't
the
know.
power. Yeah.
And I think these things, I think we're going to look back in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years and go, oh, this is what
Now
it
we understand.
was.
Yeah,
Now
but
we
then there'll still be something that we don't know because there's always more mystery. Yeah.
absolutely, the universe is a vast, vast, we're never going to understand everything, but I think we get these layers revealed to us as we go.
Yeah.
And who knows what we're going to find out is behind all of this. But
Right.
I don't think these things necessarily have explanations that are simplistic and like, oh, it was just
Right.
this. I think that
Right.
there's a lot more complexity. And
Yeah.
as we start to look at things, from hard science to more soft arts, I think we're going to see that there's much more of a blend of forces acting upon our lives than we believed.
Yeah. And when you say, I mean, it's all such a mirror of our own complexity because, if we look at throughout the history of time, the different mirrors of ourselves, maybe you start out with like hieroglyphics and then you move all the way to this. And it's really just showing the readiness of us as a species to look at our own complexities and the ability for us to look at our own complexity because it really is just like everything a big old mirror of the universe of ourselves. When I'm fascinated to think about people's fears. My hobby is kind of with myself and with the world is kind of taking those fears to their all the way out because I feel like that's the way through fear is to say, well, let's just play this all the way out because it always comes to a place of connection of spirit. Say, it's like when it's like the mantra, it's all going to be okay. It's like when you play it all the way out, it's all okay in whatever you perceive as the end. And with this, I feel like people's fears are, oh, kids are going to write their papers with this. Nobody's going to learn. People are going to be stupid, or kind of like with calculators. People used to have that fear with calculators. Oh, nobody's going to do math anymore because we have calculators. And if you really take it to its extreme, aren't we really, though, using this to become one, to become of one mind? Because if we are all sharing all this information and drawing from it and creating from it, it is like we're all sharing a brain, right? So how can that be bad when we start from that one consciousness? And that's actually what the only place this could go to would be that one consciousness, because we're sharing that brain.
Yeah, I think all technology is, there's a sense of wonder, and then there's, a sense of fear and concern, and this dates back to everything. I think that AI, one of the unique things here, we're at this moment where we are faced with the inevitability that we will no longer be the smartest species on the planet. So we
Yeah.
already see AI exceeding human capacity in certain things. We don't have a general AI that can industrial strength know more about everything or understand the world better than we can in general. But in specific areas, AI already beats us. And so we are used to, since the dawn of time, being the smartest species that we could perceive on the planet. That's about to change.
Mm.
And
And
that
that sense of separateness within ourselves, right? I mean, before now it'd be like, this is the person that has the most knowledge, or this is, or this is what keeps us separate. There's people who know this and people who don't know this. And now we all are having equal access to knowledge and equal access to, yeah. So it is an equalizer, and that is what our egos are afraid of.
it's an equalizer. Yes, I think that's very true. So now the internet brought equal access to information. AI is bringing equal access to knowledge and competency and skills. But then there's the meta question of the machine getting smarter than we are, and what are the implications of that? And there's a lot of people who look at both of those things, the equal access and the fact that the AI will now be the dominant intelligence that we perceive, as fraught with concern and anxiety, which is interesting.
Well, and I have to share with you, you had a big role in changing my own personal perception of AI, because before I met you, I certainly didn't know anybody who was kind of behind the scenes with it. So I had my own perception of, there's this picture that's painted of who is creating this technology, and sometimes it's not so flattering, and it's like, and that maybe they don't mean well, and all that. And getting to know you and getting to know your spiritual awareness and connectedness and explorations, it really gave me comfort. It's like when you, I hate to make this comparison, but it's like if you like meet a politician and you're like, wow, they're really connected, and I believe they're a really good person, and that brings the topic of intention, because people are always asking me with readings, do you have to worry about accessing bad energy? Can something bad come through if I'm connecting with spirit? And the answer is that can happen, but it's all about your intention, what you set your intention to be. And so before reading, it's, setting my intention that this lift everybody up, be in the highest and greatest good, create this new level of awareness for the planet. And I feel that it's the same when we're talking about this type of work, that the intention you go into it with is going to dictate, and the intention that we all collectively go into it with is going to dictate the direction we go in with it. If we were collectively going into this with our shadow selves running it and our fears, then it probably wouldn't lead to a great place. But going into it, with people like you and all of us being focused on, hey, let's look at the amazing possibilities that this can bring us, and having leaders that lead the way into that is really going to make all the difference in where it goes.
I think you're right. I think the intention is really important. And I think that, for myself personally, I'd like to see AI used to amplify human potential, not to replace it, right? So I think that making smarter and smarter machines is one thing. I think using AI to make smarter and smarter people, and a broad definition of smart, is the right way to go. So I think these things, we're at a point where we can really amplify human potential on a broad spectrum of opportunities, as opposed to try to replace, supplant, and just have, faster and faster and smarter machines.
Mm-hmm. And when you feel into that human potential and you tap into your visions, and we talk a lot about that new earth and that higher awareness, and that, what do you envision that being like for your children, for their children? I mean, what do you see when you tap into that vision?
And I think it's about deepening our awareness and understanding of our world and our universe. The hard sciences tell us that quantum is a real thing, that dark matter, dark energy is 95% of the universe. And there's all this stuff that we know is real, and we have no understanding of how it actually operates and what's really behind it. And I think that the chance to understand it is going to require a different thinking. It's not the same way that we've been learning that is going to lead to these breakthroughs. And I think AI could be a catalyst for, humans gaining an understanding of our world and our universe, to a very, very significant level. And I think that's required to help us, deal with some of the more existential issues that we see on the planet. So I see AI as not, accelerating a demise, and there are a lot of really smart people who believe that. I think it's going to accelerate an understanding, and breakthroughs that are going to set us on the next part of our journey as humans in the universe.
Yeah, it really is just another incarnation of this work, of what I do, which is feeling into, believing that most of the planet is going to move toward love and toward healing, and that, like you said, even though there's a lot of the planet that's not moving in that direction, there's going to be enough that is, and you have that tipping point and that's going to cause us to progress in the direction of light, in the direction of where we want to go.
And that's an interesting thing that you said, love. There's a very, very famous AI researcher that I recently heard being interviewed on a podcast, and he was being challenged on, well, how do you make sure these machines don't end up like, taking over? There's this whole issue of alignment. How do we make sure the machines don't decide to, turn us into paper clips? And he said, his name is Ben Goertzel, he said that the key is to figure out how to instill love in these systems. So how do you teach an AI love? And he believes that that's a very, very key thing to start to really understand. And that, I thought that was really, really profound. And I think it's sort of what you're leaning into as well.
Well, that's showing up even in children's literature. There's a book called The Wild Robot that is, I mean, it's a series, but it's novels about a robot who does learn to love this animal that's her child, and it's really amazing because the robot is basically, raising itself in the wild, programming itself, and it's learning this stuff and about love and emotion. And really, if we look at it, it is another reflection of ourselves. It's sort of like we're wanting this technology to go in the direction that actually our human selves have been moving away from. Let me backtrack so this makes sense. But if we look at, early civilizations are very connected to spirit. They're working, they're moving in unison with spirit and the planet. They understand the stars, the connection to the earth, all of it's connected. We're all connected. And then the separation starts happening. And as people, we start moving more and more and more into the head. We start becoming kind of computer-like because we start moving more and more and more into our intellectual space. And then we become more separated. And then you can see us over time, even developing technology, really just moving into the space of the ego and the mind and sort of de-emotionalizing ourselves, de-loving ourselves, right? And now we're sort of trying to come back to, no, remember, we are these connected beings. So isn't it interesting that that's reflecting in the technology, that we're like, let's teach technology what love is, while we're reteaching ourselves what it is, and that's another mirror. And I think I think Einstein talked about that too, didn't he? He talked about adding love to scientific equations and how that was what really
It's
changed.
really interesting, right? And you can sort of draw an analogy. You can think of computers up until now as these great calculators as more ego-driven, right? Formulaic and even ego-driven, whereas AI is this attempt at intuition.
Yeah.
And this attempt to replicate human intuition in analyzing data.
Yes.
And so that certainly resonates with me.
And as that happens, simultaneously as that artificial intuition or artificial intelligence is ramping up, we as a human species are coming into this awareness that actually emotional intelligence is the new genius. Actually being able to function from the place of the heart chakra, and that being what leads you is real intelligence, or the next level of intelligence. And so it is, again, just mirroring. It's like, okay, so technology is going in this direction, now we're going to go in this direction. It's like when you talk about AI replacing jobs, and people can get upset about that, or technology replacing jobs, self-checkouts, whatever it is. And that's very real in this moment, and it does affect people in this moment. However, what's on down the line, or from a spirit perspective, is, and then new purposes are created, new ways of being on the earth are created that don't tie you to that task, that don't tie you to that function. So when you look at it as an evolutionary thing, yeah, technology can come in and knock people out of the way in these slots, but in the spirit version, that's to free people so that people can actually be more in their purpose, in their flow, in the, not have to be slaves to earthly roles like that anymore.
I agree with you. And I think maybe, I've always had an issue with emotional intelligence, because I think emotional intelligence implies this connection to emotion. And I think that ego and emotion are very wrapped up. I think what you're talking about is even a more higher, pure, intuitive intelligence that goes beyond, the emotions, and is really linked to something much more profound.
It's energetic intelligence.
Energetic intelligence, right? Which is, I think, a really interesting redefinition of what we're talking about.
Yeah, it is. It is. So it's no longer, can I be the most intelligent mentally? Can I even be the most in tune emotionally? It's not, it goes beyond even intuition, because intuition is tapping into that higher guidance, but as we're talking about, that can take many, many forms. It is energetic intelligence, which is, what am I, how connected am I? Because when we're talking about love and the missing element of love, or the element of love that we want to infuse into things, love is connection. It's the connection to the entire universe, the knowing that you're not separated from that. And unintelligence, or even that sense of intelligence without connection, is fear. So
Yep.
disconnection equals fear, connection equals love, and that just makes it even easier to understand. if you're using and developing and implementing technology from a connected place, an energetically connected place, that this is part of the universe, we are all heading in this direction of the light, then that's one thing. And if it's from a place of disconnection, of I want to be seen as separate and better than, or I'm fearful, then it's fear. It's not connection. Yeah. And I feel like collectively, as people, just taking technology out of it, we are collectively being asked to put down that burden of the fear and to say, as long as I am connected energetically in everything I'm doing, there's nowhere I can go wrong. That end point is always going to be good. And taking that view with everything, with even this. One thing I love is that you told me about the idea of you can tell the AI, I want a certain style of art, and you were like, this would be a fun way to even create a tarot deck, which it would.
Yeah.
And I wonder, who will be the first to put out, or if it's already out there, an AI tarot deck, because that would be really interesting and fun to see what comes out of that, what it looks like, what the symbols are, what the hidden meanings are, and what it's telling us. That would be cool.
Well, you can imagine, personalized AI tarot decks, right? So your AI tarot deck would differ from mine based upon the inputs we gave the system. And that's, one of the areas that, I explore with AI is how do we create AI that understands us? Because right now, when we talk to these systems, they seem to be giant oracles in the sky that know so much about so many things, but they don't know us, right? And so now if you can instill a sense of who you are and have this system start to understand, then you think about the hyper personalization that can happen. And, in your world, you think about these, intuitive sessions powered in part by AI, and what does that start to look like when these systems really understand, and when these systems not only know you from 10 minutes, but 10 sessions together, and what are the insights that come from that?
Yeah. And then the real point is so that you can know yourself on that level too, because if I used a tarot deck that was created through AI based on things that it knew about me, I'm sure in using that deck I would learn all kinds of things about myself that I have no idea about consciously right now.
100%. I mean, and this is what AI does best. AI is incredible at seeing patterns that we don't see. But you can only see the patterns if you give it the information to look at and train. So the more that you work with an AI, the more it's able to understand and to see your life, the better it's going to get at making those jumps in terms of identifying patterns.
How do you feel when you see, or do you even see this? Does it register on your radar? But when you see people misusing this technology or not, how do you feel when you sort of see people doing it in a way that's different from how you approach it?
Well, on the misuse side, I mean, I think that I am not concerned about the robots taking over the world. For a whole variety of reasons, I don't see that as a possibility. I do see bad people being able to do bad things at ever increasing levels of sophistication using AI. So that's just a reality. And we can't just say, oh, it's not going to happen. We have to think about that. The answer is not to stop these things. The answer is to develop AI. You fight fire with fire. So you need to use AI to basically protect and shield us against bad actors using AI.
Well, it's just like anything else, I guess, it's just like any other point of development in time. And there were people that used it for
not good purposes,
yeah.
and they're right. And I think that, what we're going to see is AI will save us from a lot of the stuff that people are concerned about with AI.
Well, one thing that's really fascinating is to look at our kids, and you and I both have kids that are growing up with this technology, and with it being a part of their daily lives and something they're just aware of and will never not be aware of. And you made an interesting point in a talk recently where you were talking about letting children sort of teach us about technology and not getting in our heads, but watching what they do with it. And that really goes hand in hand with a lot of what comes through in the readings, which is, letting the children lead us in where we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about the internet generation. We now have the AI generation. So we're going to have kids that grew up not knowing what the world was like before they had access to this hyper intelligence in a variety of different ways. And I think one of the best ways to learn about AI is through your kids. A lot of adults have sort of a disconnect, a harder time relating to these things and understanding it. I'm in the field and I hear things all the time from my 12-year-old son who's like, hey, look at this, or look what I made, or look how I'm using this with music. And I'm just like fascinated by his ability to discover and to use these things so naturally, to pick up these tools as if he's been using it his whole life.
Yeah.
That's really amazing.
Mm-hmm. And on a personal level, I mean, just because one thing I find in working with people with their mind blocks and fear blocks is that the more complex our minds are, and the more, and of course this can break down to also what your astrology is. The more you're in your head, if you're an air sign, or the harder it can be to access spirit connection. So I guess what I'm asking is, like, how do you get past all your brain stuff, both natural and artificial, to connect with your spirituality? What are the tricks that you use to kind of get out of your head?
But they're my special tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Oh,
can't.
you got to share them, because that's like pointing
No, I
people
mean,
to
all most of my special tricks I learned from you. So one of the things that you taught me that has been very valuable is when something's going on and I'm, in some loop. I wake up in the middle of the night and my, brain is exploding with whatever. I ask myself, would my guidance, would my higher self be saying this or
Mhm.
not? And 99 times out of 100, the answer is no. And just that interruption
Yeah.
is a very powerful way of kind of snapping back and going, oh, that's just my ego doing my ego thing. That's my calculator, not my AI. Um, and so that's been very, very profound for me. And I think that creating those points of interruption, the more and more we interrupt, the more we have a chance to rewire the brain and
Mhm.
rewire the heart brain connection, which is so key. The reason you think about PTS, the reason why, one of the reasons that people have such a hard time with these visions of the past that have been traumatic is they keep replaying them in their head. And so
Mhm.
neurologically, every time you play it, you're strengthening
Yeah.
those connections, right? And by interrupting in some way, you are changing those connections. And the more you interrupt, the more your brain has a chance to rewire and
Yeah.
connect with what you want to connect with, as opposed to the things you don't want to. So this interruption is so key.
Yeah. Yeah. And listening to the body is so key too, because you know with our kids, with ourselves, we can get so absorbed into the technology. I'm sure that hours can disappear while you're working on things with AI too. And we really do leave our bodies. We kind of go up, we go into this other world. It is like being in a virtual reality, so our bodies have ways of letting us know that that's happening. Mine, I get a crushing headache or tension or whatever, feel just sick. And, where sometimes we can just feel floaty or whatever it is, but listening to the body and giving it ample time, to connect as well, and just not allowing ourselves to be in that place all the time, because it is so easy to let ourselves just be there all the time, up in the head or in technology. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting. I've done a fair amount of learning in the field of neuroscience and cognition. And one of the things that we're starting to understand, we used to think that all thinking, all feeling originates in the brain and sort of travels down the body. But what we're discovering is that things happen and are first perceived by the body and then travel to the brain. It's sort of the reverse of what we've been thinking for so long. So that listen to the
Mhm.
body has both the intuitive, energetic implications, but also, as we're discovering more and more basis in science. And that's why I think these things start, as we said before, I think we're going to look back in 10 years and go, oh my goodness, we now see these connections. This isn't stuff that, people are making up. This is stuff
Mhm.
that we're just at the tip of discovery of many things that our kids are going to look back and go, I can't believe you thought that, listen to your body was some woo-woo thing that was connected to, it's like, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And that's exciting to see that transformation,
Oh yeah. They're gonna be, what do you mean there was a time when you didn't get it? Like what?
right? You didn't understand that energetic intelligence was everything, right?
Yeah. They're gonna wake up in the morning and first thing they do is just gonna be like, let me just align my chakras, do, 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 do,
Yeah,
do. And they
exactly.
just completely know that, and they're just gonna look back and be like, oh my God, how did you live? And be like, it did not feel good.
Right.
It really did not feel good. Why did you go to the doctor so much?
Right. And you think about the chakras and all what you're talking about in the heart and all this, these are electrical systems with energy. And you imagine that we will have devices, systems that will be able to perceive that on a very granular level,
Yeah.
connected to an AI, and you'll wake up and your AI will be like, oh, your heart chakra is a little, so let's do this for
Yeah.
10 minutes, right? And so that will happen. And it's going to be a very interesting world.
And it's not a bad thing as long as you're connected. I mean, I think when people envision that being a bad thing, it's in a way of saying, of inserting our own ideas of power, control, and passivity into things. But if you look at it as, no, this is another tool that's supporting you, just like crystals support you now, and in accessing certain energies, this will be another tool that supports you. It's just shifting the way you look at things. Yeah.
100%.
Just like everything is shifting the way you look at things. Yeah. Which is why, I mean, I was a little afraid to dive into this topic um, with my listeners, because I was a little bit like, oh, there might be a lot of resistance in the spiritual community to talking about this. But no, if you're really looking at everything from that place of accepting what is, and looking at everything as serving you, well, this is part of it too. And if you look at everything as divine, how would that exclude this? I mean, does divine exclude air conditioning, electricity? Like, what does it exclude and what does it not include? Because I mean, wait, those are the same, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Andrew. And if people want to learn more about what you do, or anything having to do with anything that you think would be good for them to explore having to do with AI, where would you send them?
I'd send them to play with these tools. I think the most important thing that anybody can do at this point is to develop their AI fluency. And I think the best way to do that is by experiencing AI directly. I think that there's Chat GPT, what the whole world knows. There's systems, Perplexity AI, that meld Chat GPT with internet search so you can get up-to-date information. I think that really, playing with these systems is the absolute best way to just raise intelligence and our understanding, and
Mhm.
becoming AI fluent is the best thing you can do for yourself and for your families.
And if you really want your mind blown, ask your guides to direct what you're doing before you do that, and then ask them to show you whatever they want you to see, and you will get your mind blown. So,
I agree.
yeah. Thank you, Andrew, for being here. This has been amazing.
My pleasure. Fun conversation.
Yeah, we'll connect again soon.